Wera, let's dive in. Thinking about your journey in uplifting women in and around the game and having a space to do that in the media light, where does that drive come from? What is that motivating factor for you? Can you give us a little insight there?
Yeah, sure. I'm very excited to be here, guys, really. And I love to have conversations about soccer with women that are kicking balls. So yeah. And well, it all began like that. I've been playing soccer my whole life, and every time I would jump into a soccer field, I would hear the "you don't belong here." I would have to fight to get the ball because I regularly played just with boys as growing up. I had nothing that was like close to women's team or be around women who were playing too. I was like literally like the only girl playing just with boys. And I what I've heard about everybody telling me like, you have to quit, that's not for you, soccer is not for women. And I could not understand how something that I love doing so much and that it felt so good for me would be wrong just because people were telling me that it was wrong. And I have a really funny story because my brother loves fashion and I love soccer. So everybody would just tease us that we were the other way behind. And like, he would get attacked, I would get attacked because he loved playing with my Barbies. And we would exchange gifts like secretly. I would give him my Barbies, he would give me his like soccer balls, he would give me like swords and stuff because I wanted to be like James Bond. So we were clearly around of what people were waiting for to happen and for us to like. We even once tried to make a spell as we were super little, and we were like, okay, something's wrong. Like, you like what I should like, so let's try to do something about it. So we try to switch bodies, and we would watch Disney and stuff like that. So we grabbed like this bucket and we wrote out the spell, and we turned it on fire, and we started like wishing for us to change bodies, and we like were super desiring for it. And we counted to 3, and then we opened our eyes, and we were still in our bodies, and the spell didn't work. But right now, as adults, we talk about it, and we talk about how we were doing that because it was out of fear. Like, we just were doing it because we didn't want to get bullied at school and confront our family with what being us represented. But the truth is that in our hearts, we were happy with who we were. So right now, that's what pushes me to every day, just like fighting for people to be who they want to be able to do and perform what they love doing the most without gender being a barrier for that to happen. So that's like my personal cause, and what motivates me every day.
It's so incredibly inspiring. And that is an amazing story to hear, especially after seeing the new Foot Sin Gennaro excuse me for any mispronunciation there, but this new Pixar film that's coming out that is featuring Wera and your background and your story. So everyone, you have to go check that out. I think Pip popped it in the chat, but that's what we need. These stories are what we need to hear more of, so folks can see themselves and feel welcome to come in and be authentic. And also it's amazing how you can touch individuals with a story like that maybe they're experiencing in their own ecosystem and in their families, or if they're not and they need something to relate to. Cari, in tossing it over to you, hearing that story and thinking about the work that Butter has done, how have you seen design maximize impact for sports brands using visual representation and giving us a little bit of feedback? I know we're talking about media in a broad stroke, both on the camera, but we're also talking about content at large. Tell us a little bit about how you see that impact for brands through visual representation.
Yeah, I think like at the end of the day, design is also a communication tool. So media is obviously communicating information. Design is also doing that. So good design helps people digest information easily and in a way that resonates with them. And so I have a design studio. We do branding for organizations like Women in Soccer, also like big companies like Puma and kind of like everything in between. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're storytellers. We're trying to communicate a message to an audience. And what I've learned over my career in the design world is just how impactful design is in influencing people, because people really make decisions based on emotion. There's a statistic that I always reference, and I actually don't remember where it's from, but you can Google it and probably find it really fast. But people make 90% of their decisions based on emotion. And so like, even if you think you're basing something on pure numbers and metrics, it's probably influenced by something that you have going on in your mind. And so design is really a tool to connect with people on an emotional level and communicate those stories. And so for me, when I started my company, Butter Studio, it was really important for me to work with organizations that were aligned with my own values. And that's how we ended up doing a lot of work in sports, because sports, especially soccer, is so influential in culture and really shapes people's views and how people like what they don't like, kind of, it's so influential. And so using design as a way to effectively communicate messages of organizations that I really believe in, like Women in Soccer, for example, is really important and really impactful, because it shapes how somebody consumes a company. So like, if something is well designed, or if something is designed in a way that resonates with you because you see your own aesthetic kind of taste or your own values represented in a certain way color is used, or a certain type of combination of the way fonts and imagery and photography are all put together, then it draws you to something, and that in turn influences your relationship with that organization. So I'm getting kind of theoretical, but basically it's a communication tool, and if it's done well, it's really impactful and shapes how people, their opinion of brands and of companies and of organizations.
Absolutely. And I thank you so much for sharing that, because that type of perspective, I think the reason I thought to tag to you after Wera told us that really special story is that storytelling and the use, the tools that we use to make something feel relatable, to make buyers buy things, to make people tune in to watch the game, to be a part of that community. They're, like you said, they're incredibly interwoven. They go hand in hand. So I might seem like those two things didn't tie in, but that's what really drew me in there to get that insight. So thanks so much, Cari, and we'll bring it back in and hear more stories from you on some of the work you've done with Butter, including the amazing podcast where now you're doing verbal storytelling as well. Natalia, it makes me think of the power and the impact that Telemundo had specifically when it comes to this past World Cup. So you were the exclusive Spanish language home for the FIFA Women's World Cup and had an unprecedented 550 hours of Women's World Cup TV coverage. What is the impact on viewership when Spanish speakers were given access to this game? Did you feel that? Is that new to you? Was that something that you're familiar with? And how did that help to shape the power of the game, especially when we had Colombia and other Latin and smaller teams performing so well?
Yeah, I feel like it's so huge, the influence and the impact. And you don't realize when you are comments and in the games, you don't realize about this. But then when you are starting receiving some text for the people, saying thank you, saying, oh, how important is have a female comment the games, and talking about Colombia, talking about other, Hispanic teams that are in the World Cup, empowering women. Yeah, and then you feel so grateful, right? And I feel like all the time so grateful to have this opportunity, because I am as a coach, I like to try to transmit and to show the people the beautiful game. I always believe that it's possible. Play soccer, but play beautifully, right? And I think the women's soccer is more beautiful than the men's soccer, that we play better. And it's the tool that we have to express this art. And I didn't have the opportunity, the story that she explained before, sorry, about was in Mexico, difficult in Spain. I have the same situation. I could not play soccer until I was 14 years old because there was no team. There was only for men. And I tried to play with boys, but the federation didn't allow to me. I feel like now I have the opportunity to explain in the TV about soccer, and I feel like a responsibility, right? But I feel it's really important and more in Spanish and try to empower some community that didn't have access before to soccer or is difficult. No? So I feel like it's a really powerful tool, no, that we have and this big responsibility. I don't know, and I have the opportunity in addition. The Spain won the final, right? O sea, it was like a perfect, no? And Colombia did really, really, really good, no? O sea, I feel like it was like a very important that these kind of the national teams are showing that not always the strong and the historical big teams are winning. Like it's important to invest in women's soccer, and when you do correctly, pues these have the reward that be in the semifinal, in the quarterfinal. So I don't know. I have the experience as a head coach in the under-17s World Cup as well. That Colombia and Spain are right the final as well, right? So I feel like there are a lot of examples, and being able as a part of the Telemundo to share this to the people and well. And other thing that was really curious was I read some Twitters or some text that the people was saying, well, we are English language, but we put Telemundo because we prefer how they explain the soccer, how they live, the passionate and the passion that they share in the games and the English TV, right? And this makes you feel like, wow, this is unbelievable, no? There are a lot of people that want to listen us because the way that we feel this experience and the way we feel and share about women's soccer.
It's really powerful to hear that. And especially that component, Natalia, when you said, I got these text messages following a game, following my moment to speak to these things. Those are the little moments. Those are the things that seep through and have the tangible impact, but it takes time. It takes years, Wera, you were saying, and Natalia, you were remarking on, right? You were trying to play with the boys, but thankfully in a lot of spaces in Spain, in Colombia, in the US, but still not everywhere, there are more spaces where women can get up onto the field and feel like they are playing around people that look like them or sound like them, and to a certain extent. So they feel more welcomed. And that's the impact, right? That's the representation. That's where it goes. Natalia, if you were going to add anything there, I don't know, you came off mute, feel free.
Well, the most beautiful experience that I have is after Spain won the final, I have the opportunity, Andres Cantor allowed to me, Natalia, say whatever you want. And was a moment that I wanted to say thank you all the dads, moms, and grandfathers and grandmothers, because in my experience and that I know that because them, a lot girls are able to go practice, right? And was the moment because I know that how difficult it is in Spain, at least this situation. Sometimes you, in your town, in your small town, you don't have a team to play. And your family and your friends need to help you for drive to use sometimes a lot hours for be able to play. And I wanted to share this, and was unbelievable how many people after this text me saying that they feel like I represent. That was a beautiful speech, because a lot of people, families, grandpas felt like there was like a touch or resonate with them because they are helping the daughters and the friends for be able to go practice, right?
Exactly. Thank you so much for adding that. That's the where it is. That's where the power comes in. I'm so happy to hear you were given that space. And it makes me think too, in Jackie, Women Kick Balls, providing a space, breeding it entirely from out of your own doing. What does that do for you, for your community and network? I mean, what is the power that, Women Kick Balls has from it being its standalone publication to dictate the narratives?
Yeah, like Natalia was saying, I often get a lot of messages, particularly from moms, actually, which is kind of funny. But last year when I came out with my first magazine, I got this message from a mom in LA, and she sent me a picture of her daughter with my magazine near her Christmas tree because she got it for her as a gift. And she was saying, my daughter looks up to you. And I've never met this family before until like afterwards, but she was just saying how her daughter feels like now she can have this example of this career and this representation as possible. And I remember just like seeing that message and be like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, because I think sometimes as a creative or working in the media, you're so like focused on your job, and you so busy. Sometimes you feel like you don't have enough hours in the day, but sometimes you can get so wrapped up in your work that you forget those tangible aspects of the impact and the people that, you are influencing or like connecting with through social media or whatever it is. And so I think with Women Kickball, the thing that I wanted to really change and grow was having access to quality news, because I think for me, like, I understand the business side and the journalism business model of charging people for articles and having paywalls. But, if you want to grow the women's game, my opinion is that you have to make it accessible to every soccer fan. So the person who's just learning about soccer to the hardcore soccer fanatic that'll do like anything. So that's where like Women Kickball is my biggest thing and mission, is providing accessibility to news, because not everyone can afford like subscription, journalism models and things like that. So yeah, I think with Women Kickballs, it's been really cool just to see the impact and the growth. But everything that I do, I always talk about how I want to like do the thing that my younger self wish I had, because I actually wanted to pursue sports journalism at 17 years old, which I know can be misleading because I probably still look 17, but it's been like 9 years now. And I, went through different kind of phases of figuring it out and trying websites. And then in 2019, that's when I really created Women Kickballs. But it wasn't until last year that I really started doing freelance work. So I feel like throughout my career, these different seasons and phases of it, there's different aspects of growth. And yeah, I think the more you grow, the more you realize the different impact that you can have with people, and especially being at games. Like at the World Cup, I was a solo traveler. I was out there for 36 days. And I remember thinking like, I'm not going to know anyone, but whatever, like it's soccer. Like, I just want to be where the games are at. And I can't tell you how many times I'd be walking to a game or even doing something non-soccer related, and people came up to me because they were like, "Are you Women Kickballs?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" And so we would just start talking. But I think that's so cool how just soccer connects people. So that's one of my favorite things that I've been enjoying too.
Thanks so much, Jackie. And I want to ask you a follow-up question around, you mentioned a magazine. What is that magazine? Magazines, when I think of a magazine, I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't looked at a magazine in a long time, except for the like Nature Conservancy that I get because whatever. So tell me more. What's the magazine?
Yeah, so last year I had this idea to create a magazine around the two Southern California teams, because I'm from Southern California, in the NWSL. And then this year is another magazine that's going to be featuring NWSL players in the World Cup tournament. So it's actually launching next week, which I'm very excited about. But it's 40 pages full of my own stories and photos, and then I designed it. So I've been very busy producing that. So it'll be available on my website next week. But yeah, that's been a whole process as well. Like, I never planned to do magazines. It's just something that I'm passionate about. And just, I really kind of saw the pieces come together of like all my different skills come into this magazine. So yeah, that's something where it'll be shipping out very, very soon.
Amazing. And we're a fan of it. I just wanted to get the word out to folks if you didn't know about that. And one other big component behind what we do, and also when we think about representation in media and the power of it, show ups, get behind contributors who are in these spaces. So that way their work gets highlighted more. They get more opportunity inside of the industry to find those roles, to make hiring decisions, to make decisions on content, like sharing a story, to thank the people who don't often get thanked, as Natalia said before. Wera, when you were at the World Cup this past summer, what was it like, and how did you know, like, how did you think about what content you were going to showcase? I think you were working with the U.S. women's national team, so you may have had some requirements on that front. But tell us a little bit about how you got into that role, and maybe we can inspire some folks on this call to think about their next pathway. But also, what I want to do just before I hand that off to you to give us some feedback there is pivot from that question and thinking about what Jackie said about some of the obstacles we face. So Cari and Natalia, we want to talk a little bit about that, because as is true for this event, we're called Coffee and Progress. So we want to think about the things that we still need to do, that we still need to continue to drive behind, to get more folks inside of these spaces, to inspire these next generations to ensure that the Latino population has representation and feels seen inside these spaces, because the sport, especially in the US, has been monopolized by a pay-to-play model that creates a lot of access for affluent white-facing folks. So how do we continue to navigate some, where can we advocate for the next person, and what are some of the obstacles that we can continue to work through? But where when the World Cup stuff was pinging around, I wanted to touch in on some of the work you were doing with the U.S. women's national team.
Sure. Well, first of all, and speaking about representation, it was a huge challenge and quite an adventure, because I received the email from Alex Wayne from US Soccer. She's amazing as well, and she pushes so much for women in sports. And she told me like, hey, we're going to the World Cup. We would love for you to come with us. So the first time I received the email, I thought that was just like the invitation and that was it. So we jumped into a meeting and she told me like, there are other runner-ups and we have never ever before had a Mexican girl do it. It's like women's soccer, US soccer national team. And it's like a very patriotic, like job. And when you're following up your team in the World Cup, you have the jersey of your national team, of course. So I really thought I was in a disadvantage, like fighting for a role as a Mexican girl. But it was amazing because what primarily like stood up for everything, it was like the whole career I have on gender equality, aside from being a content creator, because that kind of, for me, comes after fighting and what I do offline for women in sports. Like all day I am in Mexico creating revolutions to fight and get like the federation here, for example, they hate me and they haven't invited me, like nothing, like they do stuff and it's like publicly known that the federation here, they don't like me. So to receive an invitation from US Soccer and the federation there, it was like a huge thing, because I have never been able to work in my country with the federation that represents my country, because of everything I represent and everything I fight for. So it's kind of crazy. So it was great. Wow. I had a few Zoom meetings I was called into so that they could get to know me, but especially that they could know what I have done for women in the game. And like talking about that, Rachel, I wanted to tell too, I think like in the industry, we should stop really trying to be the ones that get the spotlight for doing things, because I feel like sometimes we're just fighting against each other to see who gets the renowned name and who gets to do the things. Honestly, with everything that's going on, what we need is people doing it. It doesn't matter who makes it happen. And if they do, like, great, like standing ovation for that. We need to work together. And here in Mexico, it happens a lot. I'm pretty sure it's all around the world, but on the world, I mean, here in Mexico, like women here, they just want to be the ones who made it happen and the one that people know that made it happen. And that's not the point. The point is to make things happen. So being able to go with US women's national team as the first Mexican girl do it, it was amazing. And even though I have the point of view from Mexico, I have been following up with US women's national team since forever. Like 4 years ago, I was in Leon seeing them win and I follow them around, because what these girls represent goes beyond nation. Like it goes towards what they have done for the game and the inspiration that they have been for every woman that has ever loved soccer. Like, I think if you love soccer, you love US women's national team. Like, it doesn't matter where you're from. And at the World Cup, the idea was, I had a task, I had a job, like I had to follow what they needed for me to show up. But it was like super cool adventure. Lauren Marquith, she was my producer, and we just were together trying to bring to everybody who wasn't at the World Cup, like everything around what was going on, the fan zones, the stadiums, and just following her up. I think it was a great World Cup, and I can see like Pip was there, Monica was there as well, because I can see a lot of the folks that were there. And I think that was the beauty of it, that we were able to meet at the World Cup with like this crazy magical destiny thing that happens with women in sports, that suddenly you know no one and then you just know everybody and you hold hands and you you work up your way together. And that's how I'm actually here today. So I think that's the most amazing part of women in sports, is that we find each other and then we walk together.
That is, if that's not a takeaway for the day, that's so powerful, Wera. And yeah, the reality of doing it together. We need to celebrate each other. Of course, we know like there are limited spaces, but there is so much opportunity and room to connect and uplift one another. Yeah, well said, Jackie. Mic drop. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'd love, Natalia, to hear a little bit about your journey in getting into the analyst role, or you know, your experience as a coach in this ecosystem. What are some of the potential challenges you faced, or what is a tip you have when it comes to making space, bringing, like, reaching back and sponsoring that next person and bringing them forward?
Yeah, I feel like I was the only lady or female in the room, right? When I was studying the license in Spain, I was the first woman to get the pro license. And then honestly, it was the first time when I come US, was the first time that I feel that there are other women and there are other females fighting together. There are more people in the room, more ladies, no? So I feel more support about the female perspective in the same role, right? But I feel like sometimes the questions with the people start like, Natalia, how I can get there, or how I can fight in this small environment. No, always I say like you do always like a professional. You do the best you can. In the role that you are a player, you are a coach, you are an analyst. I feel like as a female, we are exposed, and everybody will look at us like a double, about your work, and because you are a female, you are like the zoom is small, right? And then look at us like a more deeper, no? And for this I say, as a female, you have the responsibility, right? We want or don't want this, but we have the responsibility to show everybody that we are doing good because our work, but in addition because we are a woman, right? And I feel this is sometimes like a double responsibility, but I feel like it's that you need to feel grateful, and in the role that you are, for example, but you need to solve this, right? And I try to do this as a coach. Well, I feel like when I was coaching players, can be younger player, can be professional players, I feel like it's important that they receive from a female coach, right? Sometimes there are a lot of ladies or girls or females that didn't have the opportunity to have a female coach. And I feel like we feel definitely we have some experience, like Wera share, like the difficulties to have or to arrive there. And I feel like there are a lot of stories about resilience. And when we share this with the player, I feel we connect in the level that sometimes the men's coaches cannot do because they didn't have this experience, right? So I feel like we have some treasure to share with them, and this makes you a magic connection with the player sometimes, right? And I feel like I use this as when I do the analysis in the games, the way I try to explain the soccer, or when I was in the World Cup, I was so happy to see in some player playing the World Cup that I coached, no, a time ago, in Spain or in US, and I feel like, oh man, I want to share, and I was able to share some stories of them, like some difficulties that they have, and I can share in the first person because I coach them. And I feel it's important that the people knows about this player, right? All the resilience, all the difficulties, how difficult it is for female players or female coaches or female soccer media, right? Being there. And it's beautiful that the people hear this from the first person, no? So we are able to explain this. I feel we are able to connect everybody, all the females, I feel we have like a resilient stories in our jobs, not only soccer. I feel like the society make to us like sometimes have more difficulties than other people, and I feel it's important to connect with this. And this is the approach that I try to do, try and connect with the stories and the resilience, and sharing the experience that I have. And feel so grateful to being able to coach this player, for example, and then after this being in a World Cup and talking about them, right? I feel like it's something really, really beautiful.
Thank you so much for sharing that. The power of taking your experiences and being able to leverage that in your messaging as the analyst on a TV screen, I think it's really special, and it's going to have that impact that young people need to see and need to hear, so that they not only feel grateful, but they're like, yeah, I deserve to be here. They know they feel welcomed inside that space, and they know that they're the journeys of the folks that came before them, they've made space for them. They've given them that access in that room. It's really powerful to hear that. And it makes me think about Jackie, some of the tips that you've talked about when it comes to making an impact for women and underrepresented folks, people from all different underrepresented gender identities when they're working in media. You talked about in a piece I saw you do about, when you're in a press room and what else you can do to help support the person next to you to get that other reporter who's from a underrepresented gender identity to get voice. I'd love for you to tell that story. And then I know we have about 15 minutes left. Cari, though, I'd love to come back to you after Jackie and hear a little bit more about how we break down how design can help us reinforce these really powerful messages that you belong here. You deserve to be here. And yes, the fight has been fought and there's still going to be fights you have to fight. You can rise to the occasion. You have this space and we want you to be heard. But Jackie, I'd love to tag you in here.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well, because in the press conferences and just the media setting, of course, when depending on who you're, whether it's NWSL, FIFA, US Soccer, there's different rules or just etiquette, I guess, to say that you have to follow in those scenarios. And so whenever I'm in those situations, I always think about what types of questions people are asking. And I don't know if this is me just like nerding out on communication, but I love thinking about questions because they're so important and really do shape the narrative of how stories are being told. And so I got my master's degree in journalism and we had like several classes on just reporting and interviewing techniques and styles. And I remember thinking like, why are we diving so deep into this? And like, after going through that, I remember like, wow, I'm so grateful because it really changed the game for me. And something that I think about when I'm in press conferences is not just the questions that I'm asking or listening to, but whenever I do connect with people in press conferences as well, I'm sure we just like talk about things. And so I always kind of like share my perspective on something. And one of the stories that I often reflect on of how we can help one another is I think about how when I first started going to press conferences, I was so nervous. And I don't really get nervous, but I remember I was so nervous to ask a question. And my first press conference was with US Soccer and Jill Ellis. And you have to raise your hand and you get a microphone passed to you. And I remember thinking like, I don't want to ask this question because I'm so nervous. But I thought about my Uncle Joe, who really inspired me to pursue my career at such a young age. And I thought if my Uncle Joe was in the room right now, like he would definitely tell me to ask the first question. And so I raised my hand. I was super nervous. I asked the question. And mind you, I had like a little notepad that like had scribbles of my question on it. And I asked the question to Jill, and then she goes, I'm so sorry. Could you repeat that again? Because I couldn't quite get it. And I was so nervous because I was stuttering. And I was like, man, I have to do this again. And it's just funny to think about how like I went from being so nervous and intimidated in a room to now just really like owning the power that I have in terms of just like, being the youngest minority in the room. And so, I love just getting to talk to people and share like my insight with them. The last kind of thing I'll close out with here, but kind of around that same time when I first started going to games, I remember being in a mixed zone format, which you're kind of behind this barricade, surrounded by a group of journalists. And I remember not being able to reach far enough because I'm pretty short. I'm like 5'1" or 5'2". And so I think it was Carly Lloyd who was in the mixed zone, and I had my audio recorder and I was trying to like reach over to get the interview and I couldn't. And one of my colleagues, I think I just met her that day. And she got my audio recorder and she was closer. So she like got the interview for me. And I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, that was such a lifesaver. And I really appreciated it. And so I always think about like, how can I lend that arm to people in those different scenarios? Just because when you're in the media in that setting, it can feel intimidating of like, what should I be saying? What should I be doing? And so I just think about that because you never know like who you're going to come across in those press conference settings too. And I tend to look out for those young people that are just hungry for their growth or their career. And I usually just talk to them and just encourage them or whatever it is, just because I know it would be so much easier if like I had that when I was first starting out. So yeah.
It's so special to have someone in the room and feel like they've got your back. Thank you so much for telling that story. That's heartwarming and one that will stick. And also you when you brought up Lloyd, it makes me think about pundits and the responsibilities of storytelling. And passion and emotion. And if we have time, maybe we'll come to that. But Cari, please jump in. We'd love to hear a little bit more about on the design front and, what the storytelling through imagery, it really means.
Yeah, and Pip told me I could share my screen, so I thought I might actually show something.
Please.
Okay, so I'm pulling up.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I wanted to share this. This was a project that Butter Studio did in 2020, kind of at the beginning of the pandemic, when all of our commercial work was canceled, just like most of us experienced at that time. And we decided to do an editorial project. So this is more of like a kind of more traditional way of telling stories through an editorial framework, to share the stories of female Olympic athletes that had been training their entire careers to go to the Olympics, and the Olympics were postponed back in 2020, if you remember those awful moments. And so what we did was we interviewed 10 women who were meant to compete in the 2020 Olympics about their experience with the postponement and like how they were doing, and learned so many really interesting and inspiring things from them. From some of them, like one of them in particular was going to retire and was planning to try to have kids, but she couldn't. She had to wait. And like, what does that mean for her personal life? These types of things that like men don't necessarily go through in the same way. And so what we did was we created this editorial piece where we took the stories that we heard from them and we created graphics or visuals to communicate what we heard. And it ended up being this project called She's Going to Tokyo. And we launched it on our Instagram. It got turned into NFTs with a sports company called Round 21.
So cool.
And NFTs back when Web3 was also really hot. And it got picked up by a bunch of press. It won some awards, and yeah, it was in some cool press outlets, like Just Women's Sports posted it, and LeBron's media company Uninterrupted posted it, and it was in Hype Bay. So this was like a more of like cause some of the work that we do is a bit more abstract in how it kind of pulls in this idea of progress and representation, but this was like very on the nose, trying to tell the story of these athletes whose lives and what they had been training for was totally upended because of the pandemic. And like especially women in the Olympics, especially if they're not in like one of the top sports that gets the most investment and the most airtime, are like often like very much self-funded, and like really like their whole life was being poured into this, and then it was kind of upended with a lot of uncertainty, and the rest of us in the world were also dealing with that in our own lives. And so it was really inspiring to hear from these women who are basically like these amazing superhuman athletes about their experience and what we could learn from it, whether it was the things they were doing for mental health or how they were maintaining their training, or just like what their day-to-day was like to help them kind of get by.
Something that I have to ask, or something that is, stands out too, is right. It's not pink. It's not this
not
like
pink. Yeah,
normative thing we've created about
Yeah.
what a woman or someone that isn't, is from this certain gender identity. Do you get pushback? Do you actually run in, like when I think about if you're, I know I want to be conscientious of the time. We do have some time, but yeah, what shrink it and pink it, like there's so many facets of our existence, from a design literally of products to the portrayal of a crest of a jersey that comes into play to reinforce norms as identities. And so when I think representation, it all comes in on this front. Do you ever hit like, have you ever, I know we NDAs and all that good stuff, I'm not trying to out any clients, or non-clients, but yeah, have you ever experienced that type of challenge, that it's not fitting into the mold that is, casted for a certain demographic?
I think I don't know if it's necessarily that I've received pushback on that front. I think it's something that me and the team at Butter really strive for, we have an opportunity when we're working with sports companies to do something from our lens, as at the moment, the whole team is women. We're from all different countries. We are bringing a lens that hasn't really been included in the people behind the scenes that are producing the visuals, whether it's the kits or the videos or whatever it might be that has creative outputs in it. Like if you look at who's designed most of the soccer crest, it's like almost all white men. And so when we're brought in to do things like this, it's like we have an opportunity to think of it from a really different lens and not just copy what's going on in the men's leagues. And, like maybe we think of making a crest in a totally different way. I mean, with the crest that we did for women in soccer, it's a pretty different take on like what a crest is. I mean, it's not a team, so it's a different use case as well, but it's kind of what is the angle that we can bring to it, just because, like, as everyone else here has been saying, we grew up with a totally different perspective. And so we can bring that into the work too.
And it's so important that we do, right? Because it's hard to fight against the norm sometimes. And it's hard to not just want to say, well, I got that spot, so you conform to a certain extent because we're human and we need to survive. So how do we, I think, well, first of all, thank you so much, Cari, for showing us that. It will also ping a link to the sites. You can check it out. It was very inspiring as someone just getting to know you in that time and very alone because of the pandemic. So thank you for that storytelling. It made a real impact. You mentioned it now. You just said, right, this idea that, we can do it differently. So many amazing takeaways from today that I think everyone can walk away when they're thinking about progress. Ask the first question when you're in the media room, like Jackie said, like Wera said, come together and support each other. That goes back to that competitive nature. It's real. You can use your competition for good, but also remember what it's really about, what the bigger picture is. And stay aware of your resilience. Know the power of your resilience, Natalia, like you mentioned. And those things really resonated with me. We have a few minutes left, and there's been some amazing banter in the chat. But if anyone has any questions, or they can write it down. If you want to raise your hand, or you can even tell your own story. I want to make sure that there's some time for that. So, and don't you worry, I have plenty more content and questions to spin up if there isn't anyone that wants to jump in. But thank you again, Wera, Natalia, Jackie, Cari. If there's ways that we can follow you or connect with you, Pip, of course, will send out a toolkit following this event, as we always do. But I would want to take the time to do two things. If there's a way to follow you or get in touch, tell us. And also, what's my final ask in centering around what's something that inspires you, or what's something that keeps you going, maybe from a mental wellness, when you've been hit hard over and over again by that coworker that's just still on their journey to allyship, or you aren't getting the space that you need. But yeah, so I'll start with you, Natalia, and then you can pinball it to whomever else, and we'll go like that.
Well, I feel like I was very privileged during my life to be in environments like FCB Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, Spain Federation, US Soccer Federation, right? And I have a lot of things that I want to share. Honestly, when I give up, or when I can no more, or someone is like, I working with people that, makes you think like, I should continue or I should stop. I say, well, I have something very beautiful that I need to share. I want the future players, or the people that is listening to me now in TV. I want to share with them my experience, the knowledge. I was able to talk with Johan Cruyff, with Pep Guardiola, with Jill Ellis, with, I don't know, unbelievable people. And then I have this inside me, and it's like, well, I cannot keep this only for me, because I feel like I have this responsibility to share this treasure with the female coaches, players, people that is listen in the TV. And this is like a make to me every day, like, let's go, Natalia, you need to continue fighting. It doesn't matter who is in front of you, but you need to help other people the same like other people helped to you before.
Amazing. That is powerful. The experience is epic. All right, Natalia, I'm gonna make you do a little thing. Pick someone else to pinball after you.
Cari, let's go.
I was catching up on the chat. All right, we're talking about what inspires us, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What inspires me? Honestly, like I'm most inspired by good conversation. People ask me what my hobbies are, and like yeah, sure, I love sports, but I also really like good conversation with good people like this one, and meeting people and just sitting down with them, whether it's online, offline, whatever, and just chatting, and like the inspiration that comes from that. I think it can lead you in so many different directions, and you learn so many things and connects you with more people. And so I feel like it's really important to me to always prioritize time for just hanging out and chatting. And it's not like a traditional place we might think of inspiration, like going to museums or reading design magazines or something, but it's what I find, it's like what fills me up, and I feel like I'm able to do my best work and like show up for other people too with that.
Amazing. That's you're right. It's atypical to hear that, and it makes me feel inspired because I do a lot of that myself. But Cari, your turn. You have a Jackie or a Wera to tap on to go next.
Jackie, go for it.
All right. I feel like I knew that was kind of coming because there's only 2 people left. But yeah, I think kind of going off that too, like reading for me is something that I really enjoy. I'm trying to be better at that. But there's this book called Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. And he's like a creative writer, but the lessons and just things that he talks about are so applicable, I think, even to like this space as well. And it's a really short read. So if you're like, I'm not a reader, like honestly, it's really small. I highly recommend it. But I always talk about this book because one of the quotes from it is that he says, like, write the book that you want to read. And I always thought like, whoa, that's powerful. Like, because in the soccer space, I think it's still like such a growing industry, and there's so many like kind of new perspectives that are being added all the time. And so I remember reading that book and being like, well, like I think I want to make a magazine, like just kind of figuring that out. And so it really just inspired me to like go for it. And I think, I could say my career, like a lot of it is a risk, like just taking the risk to do the thing, to reach out to this person, to go to that game. And so yeah, I think his book kind of gives you like this sense of like I don't know, just like someone else is with you in this journey, and it's not super like overwhelming or like isolating. So yeah, I highly recommend that book. And then he has a few others like Show Your Work, Keep Going. So honestly, anything by him is really good. So just wanted to share that for anyone who's maybe feeling like discouraged or whatever. Like I have doubts all the time, but when I kind of come back to that aspect of like creating the thing that I want to see, like that's something that definitely keeps me going.
All right. It's your turn to pass the ball.
Oh man, tough decision. Just kidding. Wait, actually, who's left? Sorry, I kind of looking at the chat. Okay,
Wera's up next.
Thanks, Jackie. For me, guys, basically it's like knowing what my work is doing for the girls and the upcoming generations that want to play soccer, and they deserve this free road to be able to do it without anybody telling them they can't. I remember I met Mary Harvey. I don't know if you know about her, but she was, goalkeeper at U.S. women's national team. And there was this one time, the fight with the federation was so intense. And I felt like this size against the Mexican Federation, and fighting against them to be able to create the professional soccer league here in Mexico. I was talking to her and I told her, like, I don't know what to do, like, because these guys, they were threatening me and giving me just a horrible time about quitting. And I talked to her and she told me, like, you have to remember, who are you doing this for? So it kind of started because I wanted to play soccer and that was my dream, but it turned out onto what my work and my fight was doing for these girls. And I kind of discovered a really funny, weird thing, that it was like at the beginning, I was doing things because I wanted to play soccer and I wanted to do it for myself. And that moment probably was going to be like a huge, amazing moment. But more about that, I kind of discovered that doing things for others, it's actually transcendent. So it's not about greatness, it's about transcending. If you drop that thing about doing things for ego or for recognition or just because of yourself, it becomes into something that lasts forever. It's more special, it's more profound. And for me nowadays, it has more meaning. So I always think when I'm against something, I think I cannot be able to do it, or I feel not motivated about it, I just think about those girls and those generations that my work is doing something worthy for. So that's what's behind my fight every day. And I try, it's not much of a fight, but more of a work, a teamwork, to try to transform the revolution. So you will break like the violence, and violence, go for it, into turn violence into something pretty and beautiful for the game, because otherwise I think it becomes a war, and it's not about that.
So well said. And I couldn't agree more. I used the word fight a few times. And after I did, I was like, wait, there are better words to use that are productive and that they're moving forward in a way that helps us all rise together. Thank you so very much, Natalia, Wera, Cari, Jackie. This has been incredible. Pip Penman dropped in a bunch of amazing links. We'll send those to you. One of them is a survey for feedback. Tell us how much you loved this. Tell us what needs to be different. We can't thank you all enough for coming and showing up today. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. And from the bottom of our hearts at Women in Soccer, a shout out to Fearless and Capable and Kickoff Coffee as well. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.